What is good, team? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while since we had some updates. I guess for me personally, a lot of it's just kind of been educational content around training, around nutrition. So I really wanted to use today's video to kind of just do a bit of a vlog, a bit of an update in terms of where we're at, what we're doing, what the plans are. Because it is obviously, as of this video, like 2 days after Christmas, so we're going into the new year. So a big 2026 plan for us. We wrap up our Spain leg of our tour in a couple of weeks. Then we head off to the US, and that pretty much marks the start of this next push-up. So push phase 2 in the lead up to the 2026 pro season, which is going to be very exciting. So I might throw some footage somewhere on this video of just some current physique updates, my most recent check-in, which was the end of a dieting phase. So we had about 8 weeks of total dieting. I came down about 10 kilos or thereabouts. So in terms of overall fat loss, a pretty decent chunk, setting us up nicely to kind of start this next build phase. So sitting this week at about 102 flat from a peak at about 111. Now we basically start the next progressive push-up in terms of training volume, in terms of food, in terms of PEDs, with an opportunity for about 12 to 16 weeks of growing before we start a contest prep. So I basically want to take you guys through today's session, a bit of a pull session, just kind of talk you through my general programming structure, what we're doing, how we're setting up this program, and then just kind of like sets, reps, load, execution for today's session, and hopefully some helpful tips for you guys to get the most out of this session. But I'll jump in to the first exercise, a couple of warm-up sets here, and I'll get started on my working sets. So basically looking at like programming for the next little while, it's a specialization phase mainly for upper body. So when we look at like program structure during building phases or improvement phases, I think it's a really smart idea to pair your surplus calories with higher volumes of training for specific muscle groups. You might have sort of 3 priorities with your programming. This is generally how I look at it, where you will have a main priority, a secondary priority, like a third priority or a lower tier priority, and then everything else kind of gets trained at maintenance. So for me in this block, it's pretty much just biased towards like chest, back, delts, and everything else is just trained at maintenance. So for me, I'm training upper body like 5 days a week, and I'm really only training legs once a week because I don't need that much stimulus for legs. I can get it done in one session. It's enough to just kind of maintain tissue. So for me, really good opportunity to hit all my upper body stuff. A minimum of 2, so for like chest and back, twice a week. For things like delts and arms, you know, we're looking at 2, 3, 4 times a week for the smaller muscle groups that can deal with a little more frequency and could just kind of take a beating. All right, so that's exercise 1 wrapped up. 2 sets of bent over Smith machine barbell rows. I did opt for a top set and back off there. So top set 6 to 10 reps, a little exposure to some heavier loads. And then in an effort to just kind of, I guess, drop off a little bit of fatigue, move into a lighter rep range. Again, just exposure to different loads, different rep ranges. Certainly advantageous from a hypertrophy standpoint, injury management standpoint, fatigue management standpoint. So 2 sets there. And now we move on to some more lat bias stuff. So single arm lat bias pull down. This being week 1 of my new program, it's kind of just like figuring out what movements I want to use, especially in a busy gym or like in a new environment. So I really like to use week 1 as just an opportunity to just kind of feel a few things out, see what feels good, and then I'll use that for the kind of the duration of my programming. So we'll go and find a single arm cable lat pull down. I'll show you guys what we're doing there. Single arm or unilateral lat bias pull down. So I really like this one, specifically when you have the ability of the dual adjustable cables. So you can kind of switch sides and find a position that allows you to kind of get into that lat bias pull down a little bit more. So probably get 1 more warm up set here. I've already done obviously a couple of sets of back, so pretty warm already. Just more about finding the right load for this kind of rep range. I think for this, I generally stick to that like 8 to 15 rep range, somewhere in there. Find a little bit more ability to kind of connect in this movement in that higher rep range. When you go into the heavier rep ranges, I find I lose a little bit of connection. So just utilizing those higher rep ranges allows me to kind of find a nice load that I can get a good stretch, good squeeze, and hopefully get the most out of this movement. All right, so we wrapped up our 2 sets of lat biceps pull down to a total of 4 working sets for back, which, I mean, in terms of like actual session volume, pretty good. I certainly find that anywhere between like 4 to maybe 10 working sets per muscle group in a session seems to be that sweet spot for most people. And after that, I feel like there's kind of diminishing returns, meaning the more sets you do, just kind of the less effective they become. And the more fatigue you kind of carry and the lower your performance gets. So for me, it's kind of enough to stimulate, get in, get out, move on to your next movement. So again, that kind of gives us more opportunities to train other muscle groups more frequently and with potentially more volume. So we can move on to some delts now. I've got about 6 sets of delts in this session. So total session ends up being around like 12 to 14 sets, majority of which is kind of biased towards like delts and biceps. For the arms and delts portion of this session, exercise 1, we had the cable crucifix raise, which is obviously like a pretty lateral delt heavy exercise, but coming up overhead, more in that scapular plane, you do grab a bit more front delt and you do grab a bit more upper back to stabilize that shoulder overhead. So it's kind of a nice movement to train a lot of the delts, the traps, the upper back in general. And I have opted to pair that with my standing Bayesian curls. So I think supersets, when used in the right context, are a fantastic training modality, if you want to call it that. There's nothing inherently sort of magic about supersets, but they can be a strategic way to just optimize your training from a time perspective. So for me, I can use a delt exercise straight into a bicep exercise where there's no like carryover and fatigue. It's not going to affect my performance on each movement, but I can essentially just get more work done in the same unit of time. So I can basically just bounce straight from a delt exercise into a bicep exercise, rest 1 or 2 minutes, rinse and repeat, and then I've done 4 kind of sets within the space of 2 actual working sets. So again, just a better use of time, nothing inherently magic. I can just get more work done without having to sit around twiddling my thumbs in between sets. On to our last couple of movements here for, I guess, the limbs specifically, being delts and arms. And I've opted to superset these movements because, again, there's no carryover, no crossover in like the movements that I'm choosing, which will detract from my performance from each one. So 45-degree arm abducted curl. I love this exercise. You guys have probably seen me post this one before. There is a machine that does this. It's the Hammer Strength MTS, like high cable curl or machine curl. This is just basically like a version of that if you don't have that. So 2 sets here, 8 to 15 reps. Superset that with single arm re-delt flies. I'm done for this upper body day 1 session. So show you guys how we're doing this one.
Pero una hostia, tío. O sea, pero es que no se puede describir. O sea, se me quedó todo arriba. De hecho, un amigo mío tuvo que bajar, coger el telesilla, subir hasta arriba, meterse por fuera de pista para coger un telesilla. Entonces subir a lo mejor allá 200 metros. Es una locura. Pero yo dando vueltas de campana, volteretas. Yo sin casco, pues, llevaba un gorro de estos de lujo. No, ¿sabes la próxima vez cuando quiero esquiar? Que me voy con un colega.
All right, that is pull upper body day 1 finished for this training vlog. So I hope you guys got some valuable information out of that one, and I guess a little bit of insight into what I'm doing over the next, I guess, few months leading into the 2026 pro season. So as always, if you guys get some value from this content, it would mean the world to me. If you like, comment, share, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Peace.